For the last few weeks while I've been working on other videos, there's been one handheld that I always find myself going back to. The Bittboy's color scheme and DMG-inspired design brings me right back to 1998 like no other device. I'm still rocking Pokemon Red after all these years, but I'm ditching those AA batteries and doubling down on a lightweight system with a nice color screen. Hello everyone, my name is Taki, and today we're going to be covering my favorite cheap emulation system, the Bittboy. The following video was voted on by people in the community. If you want to see behind the scenes posts about products that I'm working on or have a say in what's covered in this channel, consider subscribing and turning on post notifications. The Bittboy and its successor, the Pocket Go, are probably the most iconic products in the previous generation of Chinese handhelds. I'm going to be covering the Pocket Go in a future video, but for right now, I'm going to be specifically focusing on Bittboy version 3.5. First, let's talk about the specs of this unit. The system includes an Allwinner CPU with an average clock speed of around 700 MHz and 32 MB of RAM, 8 GB of storage with support for additional storage via a micro SD card upgrade, a modest 700 mAh battery, a vivid 2.5-inch 320 by 240 IPS display protected by glass, traditional D-pad and input buttons, an LED power indicator on the left of the panel, one mono speaker under the palm rest grille, and a headphone AV combo jack and micro USB for charging. The unit currently retails in a few locations depending on where you live. One of the main reasons why I never picked up this device when I was in America was due to the high sticker price of this on Amazon listings. This can be purchased directly from China using AliExpress for around $29 with worldwide shipping or around $30 to $40 on eBay. The price range of this device puts it well under the competition and makes it an easy recommend for a personal purchase or a gift for someone interested in retro gaming. As with anything, price and build quality go hand in hand. I'm basing this review off of a few weeks of tests and use, and even though I personally look over some of the faults of this unit due to its low price point, I'm still going to list them all for you to see. The easiest thing to talk about and arguably the best on this unit is the IPS display. The IPS display is very bright with amazing viewing angles that rival that of the RG350 that I reviewed earlier this month. The screen has an adjustable brightness setting that is controlled through a key combination or by accessing menus instead of through dedicated buttons like on the RG300. This screen does come with some drawbacks that you will undoubtedly notice if you play with this in the dark. The backlight on this panel will shine directly through the right side of the unit. You won't notice this in the daytime, but it's hard to miss in darkness. Screen tearing was a huge issue in this device in its earlier iterations, but there was a great deal of work that went into fixing this a few months ago. I have to say that if there is any screen tearing in this unit, it's so minuscule that I haven't been able to find it even when I'm trying to look for it to capture it on video. That's not to say that you won't see it if you have this device, because it's certainly possible. It's all a matter of perception and how sensitive you are to VSync issues. When we look under the glass, however, we find our first and most obvious annoyance with this device, and that's the dust that is inside an otherwise immaculate display. This will mean that you might need to do a little screen maintenance, but if you're someone that ever used to have a PSP 1000 or 2000 for any length of time, then you are probably familiar with this process. I've already done a little screen cleaning before this recording, but I'll do it again to illustrate the process. Removing the back screws on the other side of the device allows us to pull the entire unit apart and access the underside of our glass screen. A quick blow with an air can or a rocket blower removes those pesky pieces of dust and fixes this issue. While you're here, this is also the time when people like to put black electrical tape around the inside of their unit to block the aforementioned light leaks. Moving back over to the front of the device, we have our input buttons. The D-pad in particular has a glossy finish to it that is kind of a fingerprint magnet. This could also be said about the display. I find that I need to give this thing a wipe down before each use if I'm planning on using it outdoors in direct sunlight. The D-pad on this unit is a little more rigid than the other devices that I've covered so far, with a decent amount of pressure required to make contact with the board. The feeling is a little spongy, but by no means bad, just not the same quality as the more expensive units. The ABXY buttons are fairly small, but they are sturdy enough to limit you from accidentally pressing them with fat fingers. For audio purposes, this is an audio recording of the sounds the buttons make during use. Our final three buttons are essentially all the same. The R, Select, and Start buttons are the most rigid things on the unit themselves, with a clicking sound to boot. For comparison purposes, this is the sound from those three buttons. These buttons are definitely louder than the competition, but it doesn't tend to bother me because I don't use those buttons that frequently. While we're here, the mono speaker on this unit leaves a lot to be desired. It reminds me a lot of how I feel when I use the speaker on the GameKitty 350, except that I'm willing to put up with it on a device this cheap. That being said, I do tend to use headphones when I use this unit because I enjoy listening to the music of retro games at the highest quality possible. The following is a mic'd up recording of the sound directly from the speaker grill. Speaking of sound, controlling the levels of sound is a little more annoying than I would like it to be. You have to use a combination of keys or manually change audio levels inside the menus before launching a game instead of having access to a volume slider like other retro devices have. The device also decided while I was creating this review after weeks of use that it was going to start exhibiting one of the worst problems that can happen with these devices. This is going to be a huge your mileage may vary type of thing right here because there are certain people that have units where this isn't a problem, but I don't feel comfortable reviewing this product and ignoring the glaring problems like other reviewers do. My unit has a really bad buzzing sound coming from the speaker at all times, which is only ever masked during emulation by playing different sounds out of that speaker. This has to do with the PWM of the IPS display on this unit, which causes it to be audible. Several people are able to fix this issue by adjusting the brightness and sound levels to max, but this doesn't work for me. There's also a custom fix that you can apply which changes the PWM to a higher frequency, which is less audible, but this fix also doesn't work for me, even though it does for others. Rounding things off, we have our on and off tactile switch and SD card slot with a concave surface on the back where a game would go. The material on this unit is a little rough to touch. Definitely not the same quality as the original Game Boy used, but it's by no means bad. If for anything else, it will mean that you won't have to worry about your hand slipping on this device during long play. The UI on this device is probably the most interesting out of any of the devices I have in its stock configuration for a few reasons. The first reason is due to the retro-styled boot screen that you will see every time you turn on the device. The second is that this unit includes various filters in the GB and GBC emulator by default that allow you to customize the color scheme of the games themselves. This is a huge selling point to me, as those are the games that I primarily want to play on a device like this, and it's also a big reason why I like this device as much as I do. The rest of the UI is fairly standard if you're familiar with these devices. You can customize the look and feel of the device to some extent by accessing the settings menu. The theme that I enjoy the most is already applied, but the comic book theme is also decent on this device. It's also worth mentioning that you can further customize the UI by using the simple menu, but I prefer the stock custom UI more. Speaking of menus, pressing select while highlighting over an emulator or game will open up an edit menu that allows you to overclock the unit. More on this in the emulation portion of the review. We've got a large collection of emulators on this device spanning from Atari to PlayStation 1. With the current firmware version installed, you are also going to have a big bundle of ports and other games. This is by no means a selling point of this device, as all of these Chinese retro handhelds have these, but it's nice to be able to fire up some Wolf 3D or Quake on the go. Finally, the process of updating the firmware is very straightforward. I've covered this in depth in another video on the 350, but the process is essentially the same for all of these devices. Take out your SD card and download the latest firmware and extract it. Use a program like Etcher or Rufus to burn the image to an SD card, and then use a program like Mini Partition Tool to expand the file system. After that, simply drag and drop your ROMs onto the folders on your SD card and you're good to go. I will say that you should try and limit how many ROMs you have in one directory, as the loading times on some of these emulation folders that I have chug to load, and it's not enjoyable at all. We are finally ready for the most important part of this review, and that's going to be the emulation performance of this little device. I'm going to do a nice cross-section of titles from several different systems here in order to give you a clear picture of what you should expect from this device. Feel free to check the description box for timestamps for specific systems. Where does all of this leave us? With the Bittboy, we have a cheap device that can easily be thrown into a bag and left there for those moments when you want a retro game on the go. This thing is so light that I never even think twice about bringing it with me in my bag every day. It's also a stylish device with middle-of-the-road performance in most retro emulators, and at a price of around $30, it's hard not to want one. If you're considering this device, know that you're going to need to put up with all of its flaws. Buzzing audio, light leaks through the corner of the device, and the occasional compatibility issues with more demanding titles. If those are deal breakers for your situation, then the Bittboy may not be the perfect low-cost device for you. My name is Taki, and I've been your host on this review. If you like what you saw here and you want to show your support for future reviews, please consider subscribing and dropping a like below. If I left something out that you want addressed, leave a comment and I'll make sure to get back to you. I'll catch you next time for another retro device. Now go out and enjoy the rest of your day. Taki out.